From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon. On this episode, a conversation with Tom Pyun.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Wes, and welcome to another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. Today, I'm excited to welcome back to Vassar virtually Tom Pyun, class of 99, who is an author and a nonprofit consultant. Thanks so much for being here with us, Tom.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, I know you're not on campus today, which we're sad about, but you were on campus, you just told me, relatively recently, maybe a year or so ago. Is that about right?
Yeah, for my 25th reunion, and I had an amazing time. And that's how I actually found you because I
Oh,
was looking for Vassar videos on YouTube and I stumbled upon your pod and I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to talk about my book on it. So thank you for having me.
of course, and we're excited to talk about your book, which was wonderful, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I am just curious to hear what your reflections were about your time back on campus a year or so ago. What stuck out to you about that time, and what sort of is sort of, in your memory about your time on campus just last year.
Well, it's so goddamn beautiful there. And it's hard, 25 years have gone by since I graduated. And it's sort of I just never would have thought at that age, when I was there between 18 to 22, wow, this is going to be the most beautiful place you're ever going to live your entire life. And then 25 years later, you come back, you're like, oh, this really is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And just seeing old friends. And I think by the 25th reunion, everyone's egos have been sort of frayed or shattered by life. And so people are so open and humble and just grateful to be together. And
Yeah.
so it was a really beautiful experience, actually. And I mean, I was actually very sad afterwards because there's so many people I
Mm,
wanted to talk to
yeah.
who I only had like a passing conversation because there's a lot of stimulation. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I want to come to the next one if I can, just
Yeah.
because, just seeing all these people who've known you for so long, but you haven't
Yeah.
seen because of life and
Yeah.
wherever people live. It was beautiful.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. And it's high praise for you to say that Vassar was the most beautiful place you're ever going to live because you're calling in from Bali. So I'm like, wow, like it's really impressive that he's like, Vassar was the most beautiful place I've ever lived as you lived across the world for many, many times over. So that's super cool. One thing you may not know since you graduated is that Vassar actually now has a formal joint 4+1 program with the Mailman School of Public Health, which I know you went to after having gone to Vassar. So our
Yeah.
students can now do their BA at Vassar, and then in a year get their MPH from Columbia, which is a super cool thing that many students have now taken advantage of. So you weren't here when that happened, but you sort of laid the groundwork maybe by having mapped out that pathway when you were doing that exact same thing many years ago.
Yeah, I was excited to read that in Alumni magazine. It came out a couple years after I graduated from Mailman. But also, in retrospect, I mean, of course, it would have been great to shave off a year of whatever,
Yeah.
but I really needed the life experience after
Yeah.
college to really figure out what I wanted to do and what kind of impact I wanted to have in the world. And I think a lot of work experience, I worked at an HIV/AIDS hospice and residential care center, and just a lot of different life experiences brought me to global health and
Yeah.
to the public health program. And so I came into that program with just a lot more focus and
Of
maturity. And
course. Yeah.
I don't know if that was maturity was really my strength at 22 in retrospect. So there was a lot. I mean, I worked in television and film for a little while after college. So I did a AmeriCorps. So I did a lot of different. I got a kind of a circuitous route professionally
Yeah.
in the 20s, and then in my 30s, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
so I do want to talk about your 30s and beyond, which I think largely circles around you writing of this book. But I do also want to, before we do that, unpack what your time after Vassar was like, because my hypothesis is much of your life after Vassar in some way found its way into the book, right? There are some stories or experiences or things in your life that in some way became the foundations or sort of stems for different parts of the book. So let's get some of the real data about what Tom was doing after Vassar, how you thought about your life, and then ultimately how you ended up choosing quote unquote later in life to become a writer.
Those are great questions. Lots to unpack.
Yeah.
I mean, I think after Vassar, I moved to New York. I remember I was into a lot of Vassar novels, so I loved Jane McGarney's books, loved The Group,
Mm,
Mary McCarthy, and they all lived in New York City. And I grew up about an hour from New York City. And I was like, I'm going to move to New York City. And it's where a lot of people are moving. And
sure.
so I was like, I need friends, I need roommates, and I ended up rooming with Vassar people,
Mm,
and thought maybe I wanted to work in television, media. I have an older sister who works in
mm,
magazines, and I thought, hey, maybe she said, I think you'd make a great talent agent. So I worked at a talent agency. Wasn't for me, but I think that, and if one of these assistant jobs, they're hard, but they're
yeah.
also not very intellectually stimulating in many ways.
Yeah.
Like you work your butt off and you learn a lot about the industry you're observing, but you're not really being asked your opinion, like in
Mm,
class. You're not being asked to like do critical analysis or thinking. And I got really into, God bless, like no cell phones back then, and long subway rides. I lived out far outside Manhattan, and also far outside San Francisco when I moved to San Francisco too. And so you had all these transit rides, and I started reading novels. Like I always loved reading as a kid, but I
sure.
became like a huge consumer of novels, and um, so yeah, I did the media thing 2 years. Realized this isn't really for me. I don't want to be a talent agent. I don't have this. You need a real killer instinct and a real
Yeah.
passion, and I just sort of knew this isn't for me. And
Yeah.
so I moved to San Francisco, Bay Area. I moved to Berkeley, and I worked and I did AmeriCorps, which unfortunately is almost like maybe not in existence anymore, or in a much
Yeah.
smaller form. I loved it. I worked as a volunteer coordinator in open public schools, and
Mm,
I kind of realized the nonprofit sector was definitely more my speed and
yeah.
more in line of what my interests were, my passions were, and I loved public service. And then after that, I was interning at a San Francisco supervisor's office. Like I think one of the first openly gay San Francisco supervisors after Harvey Milk, of course.
Mm,
And then through that, I got a job in a HIV/AIDS residential care facility. I worked there for a couple of years, and I really learned a lot about epidemiology, public health, and I'm sort of, hey, I think this is something that I can apply, like my sociology background, my interest in the
mhm.
kind of social determinants of health, which
Right.
is thrown around a lot in public health school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I realized I had to take a lot of prereqs to make sure I wanted to do it, because a lot of different schools had some prereqs that I needed, quant and science. And I did that at community college, and it just felt right. And so I applied. I had about a 6 year gap between
Yeah.
college graduation and grad school. And it was really good because I really enjoyed the Columbia program. It was very rigorous, but it's
Yeah.
big. And
Yeah.
so I think I came in with at a huge advantage. I was one of the older students at 28, which is sort of mind-boggling now to think about. But I just came in with a lot more focus about what I wanted to get out of it. I think the amount, I mean, it's not cheap. And so I
Yeah.
think I had a better sense of like my investment
Yeah.
and like what it meant.
It
And so I really
it's
took
so
advantage of
cool.
that.
It's so
Yeah.
cool. You just hearing you talk about your career trajectory, and I'm sure this is true of many people and particularly vast people, but I'm talking to you. So, you have such a life in the liberal arts. I mean, you've done so many different things. No, seriously, right? I mean, I think there's this sort
Yeah.
of wide range of things that you have done, have touched, have learned from. And again, like I said, I could feel parts of your life, and we don't know each other, but I could feel
Yeah.
reading the book. I'm like, this is not. There's not a lot of distance from who I think the author is from this book and what's written in the book. It's a personal project. Even if it's not biographical, autobiographical, whatever,
Yeah.
it is a personal project. And so I want to dive into that more. Before that though, I have heard you say previously that there was this major inflection point in your life where you sort of realized like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing professional, emotional, social burnout. And I am just like, I can't, I can't do this anymore. And what I heard you say previously was that you heard from someone else that the cure to burnout was creativity. And so, and then that sparked a whole series of things that were creative that sort of got you ultimately along the path of writing this book. And so I'm just curious for those who are listening, who are at various stages of their lives, for you, what were the indicators that you were close to or at this sort of burnout phase? How did you sort of know that? How could others sort of think about identifying in their lives when they're breaching that sort of a moment?
I mean, there are definitely some clinical symptoms like, depression. I don't know if I was really depression for me, but it was definitely a sense of sadness a little bit, like not like a loss of excitement around work. Like I've always
Mm.
invested a lot myself in work and I'm excited about work, excited about learning. And I felt some of that spark go just because, partially my fault. Like I didn't have great boundaries with my work. And I also had some very demanding, very high impact clients and did some exciting things. I worked at the CDC abroad, and working abroad is a whole nother can of beans, and really exciting and a great opportunity. But it just, you know, requires different parts of you to live abroad, to work abroad. Navigating a lot of complex political, social, cultural norms and politics around global health. And I worked at a big consulting firm known to be demanding, and so it was sort of cumulative. And I felt like the kind of that spark was lost, and I was starting to get cynical, and also just a sense of something was missing. I think there was that
Mm.
burnout, definitely. Like I'm still very young at the time. I was still very young and early 30s, mid 30s, and but also feeling like something was really missing
Yeah.
and I didn't know what it was. I thought, do I need to get married? Do I need to have children? Should I get a dog? Do I need to, upgrade my apartment? Like just something that was definitely missing. And that was
Yeah.
a big part of it. And I think creativity definitely helped me realize that, hey, that was actually what was missing
Yeah.
from my life.
That's
Mhm.
so cool. So let's go into, at least for right now is sort of the most tangible sort of materialization of your creativity, which is your book. We actually haven't said the
Yeah.
name of the book yet heretofore, but it's Something Close to Nothing is the name of your debut novel. And congrats on that
Thank you.
accomplishment. I know it's not a small thing or a short thing. It's like a long time to write the book. And so I'm just sort of curious at the very beginning, you had this nugget of an idea to write a book and tell a story. Sort of what was that moment like? Where did that nugget come from? What seeded in you the concept that ultimately became this book?
Yes, it was about in 2016, but before that, I started kind of my creative journey in 2013. I kind of changed my work schedule around. I started taking hip hop dance classes, which I'm really bad at, but I really fell in love with, like, on like a fervent level, which comes out in the book. Took singing lessons. I sang in college. I was in a cappella group in college, and it was very fun. And so I got back into singing. I started taking writing classes, and I started writing personal essays about
Mm,
life and living in San Francisco, et cetera, my family. And some of that actually got published, and I had some really encouraging teachers. But I do love the form of the novel. I mean, it was like really just was kind of my first love on some level, and gave me a lot of comfort and entertainment as a kid. From being a kid, my dad really encouraged
mhm.
me to read, and he was a professor of philosophy, and he gave me $1 for every book I read. So yeah, and then so I went on this creative journey, and it just realized I didn't have anything really original to say as a singer. I mean, as much as I love singing, and I think I have a good voice, whatever that means. But it was, so much is less about the tone and pitch and more about what you have
Sure.
to say and just, just the spirit of your singing, emotional tone of it. And I just felt that was missing. And dance, no one was gonna hire me to be a dancer. Let's be real here. Actually, I took modern dance at Vassar
Oh,
with
cool.
Stephen Rooks, and
Mm,
I loved that class. I took 3 semesters with him, and
mm,
I absolutely loved it. It's the last time I took a dance class, was
mm.
modern with Stephen Rooks. And so I started taking hip hop, loved it. And it was actually like in the middle of the dance class, I started hearing about people in my life, friends, acquaintances, who were gay men who were having children by surrogacy. And I thought this is really interesting because these guys just coming home and they have babies, and it's like kind of debunks what we know about traditionally about how babies are made, right?
Sure.
And they were so happy, so great, and they're so grateful, and it was a beautiful kind of thing to see these men, fulfill their dreams that they didn't think were possible. through surrogacy. And then at the same time, I was doing a lot of dance classes, I think 5, 6 days a week. Every week I was at a chiropractor because I was almost injuring
You're
myself.
tearing your body apart.
Yeah. And then I don't know, during a dance class, I had an idea. What if we had this couple, gay couple, and who were planning to surrogacy, but one maybe wasn't that into it because he wanted to pursue hip hop dance. What does that mean? What does it mean to want to pursue hip hop dance or dance, which is a very fragile medium in terms of like longevity and your body and etc. I
Sure.
have a lot of dancer friends actually, and so I kind of sketched. I wrote one chapter for a class I was taking in San Francisco with the Grotto, which is an amazing writing studio. And people had positive feedback, and I was like, "Hey, why don't I write this thing? I have time between consulting projects, and then a hobby turned into something more serious. And over 9 years, 8, 9 years, I wrote it many times."
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the length of time it took you to write it, not because I think it's right or wrong or bad or good. I'm curious how, as you changed over those 8 or 9 years, and as your life circumstances changed and your perspectives changed, how did that influence the stories you told in the book?
Oh yeah, definitely. I feel like when I read that book, I really enjoy it. I'm like really proud of it. At the same time, I think this person is not me anymore at all. The person who wrote this book is, moved on in many ways. And I mean that is the challenge of writing a novel is staying in love with the characters and the story when you've moved on and you're quite frankly kind of sick of them and sick of their issues and sick of their story, right? And sticking with it, trying to make it better. But overall, the plot didn't change much after the first 2, 3 years of the book, of writing the book. It was the character development, the emotional depth of the book. I think the actual writing of it. Like I'd never written fiction before starting this book in 2016. So I was 30, was not young. I was like 36 or something. Yeah. So 30, yeah, 30, maybe 38. I'm trying to do some math here. But yeah, and when I started writing this book and I think there's a lot, and the characters are in their early to mid 30s. So as I progressed in age and hopefully
Right.
matured and did more therapy, I could really look back on these characters who, they're not me at all. Like this is not my story. There's nothing autobiographical about the book. But they are part of me,
Yeah.
right? And as I progressed and matured, I could see some of their troubles and maybe their troubles and their conflicts and their strengths and weaknesses became clearer. And it was just about trying to make that pop in the text and the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard you say that it is not autobiographical, and of course, I believe that to be true. That said, I'm curious if as you wrote the characters, and for those who haven't read, the book takes place over a period of, I don't know, 40 years in effect, right? We sort of go back to some childhood and then go forward to people's later adulthood. I'm curious if you ever thought the characters you were writing, particularly as they were aging and they were going through later life, were either aspirations of yours, or how did you think about these characters you were writing related to how you thought about your own life? Like, how did those two things influence each other?
Well, I think even though they're part of me, their story is not my story. Like
Right.
I've created a story for them, and a lot of the challenge is getting to they have to develop over time. Like in fiction writing 101, you get the character up the tree and you have to get them down. And I got them easily up the tree and kind of knew what the
Can we
main
can
conflict
we pause there
was.
for a second? Actually,
Sure,
I think that's
sure.
kind of interesting. So, for those who don't know, sort of and myself included in this group, who don't know sort of the formulaic way to think about fiction writing, explain that for a little bit, what it means to sort of get someone up and down a tree as a character.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the hero's journey on some level. It's another metaphor related to the hero's journey. Like main character had won something or is confronted with a problem And I mean, we can think of just about any Romeo and Juliet, like you have two star-crossed lovers who fall in love, but their families hate each other. That's like the main conflict, right? And then you have
Sure.
to somehow resolve that. Hopefully, you know. And um, so I kind of knew with these two men, Win and Jared, my two main characters, one was really gung ho about having a child and has begun a surrogacy process, while the other one is sort of lukewarm and not sure if he wants a father, and also ambivalent about the relationship, ambivalent about his career, and but not I'm not ambivalent about hip hop dance and has promise for
Yeah.
hip hop dance. Um, so I knew that part, but then they start to develop their own kind of life of their own. They start to, yeah, come to life, at least in my head. And then it's less about what I want and what I want to resolve, and it's more about what seems true to them, at least in my
Mm.
case.
Hmm.
And I don't want to give any spoilers or not, but I think that in especially writing about gay men who, and these gay men in this book are pretty emotionally immature. I mean, they're the stunted, and part of the stunting has to do with stigma and staying in the closet for so long, etc. Um, how do I mean? I wanted them to mature and have like, but not everyone gets the privilege to mature.
Mm.
We
Mm.
don't always have that opportunity. And so that kind of plays into it as well. Like, or some of us just don't grow. Like there are people who get stuck, and maybe that growth happens not in their 30s. It happens in their 40s. Or we
Mhm.
grow all the time, of course, but there are different spurts,
Sure.
right? And I feel like now that I'm in my 40s, there's a completely different growth spurt emotionally and spiritually than the one I had in my 30s. So, and
Yeah.
going back to that issue around perspective.
Yeah. It's funny. I hear you keep saying it's not autobiographical, but I'm telling you, I'm hearing as you speak that they're mapping onto the stories told in the book, things that are you're experiencing in your life, which does not mean that it's autobiographical, but it definitely I can feel the way in which um, the book I'm going on a limb by saying this, but when I read the book, I actually felt like in some ways it was like a healing instrument for you to have written the book. That's sort of what it felt like as I read it. The stories, the um, sort of the naming of certain tensions or narratives or um, things that may not be otherwise talked about in the lives of queer men felt like it was spoken about in a way that was attempted to be healing or like liberatory for you as the writer, not only those who read it, but also for the person writing it. Again, you can tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I felt as I read it.
It's funny you're saying this because I'd like never thought about that, but it is
Mm,
true. I mean, I think that what you just said truly resonates with me. I think part of it is that we don't always get to say what we want to say, or we don't even know what we think in many ways. Because sometimes what
mm,
we think and what we want, it's not popular, it's unpalatable, or kind of goes against where we are. And so the book and these characters did give me like an avenue to express deep-seated fears and what they call shadow work now. These guys have pretty dark shadows.
mm.
Not my shadows in particularly, to
Sure.
be honest, but dark shadows that I wanted to explore that I mean, I don't think as a person, I'm that comfortable always sharing, or at least to the point in time I was writing this. Now, maybe more so.
Right.
But I tend to try to be a pretty cheerful person and a positive person and regimented, actually. I think you need quite a bit of discipline to run a novel and run a business. And so
Yeah.
um sometimes there isn't room for like always for what I exactly truly want to say and what I feel. And so
Sure.
the book
Sure.
definitely gave like a was a vessel for that, which was
Absolutely.
I think part of the joy, right?
Yeah. As you wrote the book, I'm curious to know from your perspective who your audience was. And who are you writing for?
Yeah. I think part of it is was writing it for obviously queer men of color. That was definitely the first. I didn't feel like there's a lot of books about that. A lot of books that I read about gay men were about HIV, which is, of course, very important and very moving and hugely educational. But, I'm one generation, I'm very grateful to be one generation or 1.5 generations after that. And I missed a lot of that. I mean, and so I thought there was like new narrative, especially living in San Francisco, where being LGBTQ is pretty common, like
Yeah.
close to 10% of the city. And so with that commonality and like the lack of sort of novelty, a lot of interesting stuff comes out. And also a lot of kind of inside stories that we don't, within the community, we don't want to share because we're trying to, of course, um, convey a more positive depiction because of stigma, et cetera. And
Sure.
so I kind of wanted to unveil some of that. Um, and that was really important to me. I started writing and realized, okay, there's some tensions around interracial relationships, straight or gay or whatnot, and I didn't feel like in popular media or books. I mean, there's like the Lovings, right? Which is like, of course, we're okay, we're all good with interracial relationships, hopefully, right? I mean, but I think there are conflicts that people will tell you one on one, but they won't necessarily share.
Hmm.
And I wanted to make that part of it. So I think that audience, the audience that's ready to kind of grapple with that was
Yeah.
also whether regardless of sexuality or sexual orientation. I think people who also want to be single, I think that, especially as I get older, it's like I've been mostly single my life and it's not bad. I mean, yeah, it'd be lovely to have a perfect partner and to, have someone to walk through this life, have a witness for this life, as like
Sure.
some authors have said. But also, it's great. Like I'm in Bali writing this book, and like no one's complaining about the fact that I'm abandoning them, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think single people feel like, I mean, don't necessarily get a lot of positive or many portrayals really. That doesn't end with them with having the
Sure.
wedding and ending up with someone, living happily ever
Sure.
after. And so, I was just curious. I wanted to explore some of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read the LA Times review of your book from several months ago, and I found it to be overwhelmingly positive. But I was curious about your interpretation of their focus of your book about these two men, Win and Jared, the two protagonists, trying to, in their own ways, um, find or live out the American dream. It's funny, I had never, when I read it, that was not sort of what came to me, this concept of the American dream vis-a-vis these two men. But it makes sense to me, sort of why somebody would frame it in that way. And it's interesting because the two characters, of course, are very different, intentionally so. But they seem to be highlighting similar themes, right? To your point about sort of maybe emptiness or loneliness or like satisfaction or trying to find meaning. And so I'm just curious, again, your reflection on these two characters being embodiments of different ways of attempting to achieve someone's conception of the American dream.
Yes, and it's so funny you mentioned because originally the book wasn't a theme, didn't really pop out to me. It was when I got an agent and she's like, "This book is about American individualism," and I'm like, "It is about American individualism." Um, like I was thinking also about translation for the book, and I'm like, I don't know if this book's going to resonate in like Asian countries because these guys are
Mm.
very individualistic, and that's part of the conflict of the book.
Hmm.
And so I mean, I think there are a lot of. I mean, I'm a child of immigrants, right? And so my parents are Korean immigrants, and my parents are passed. But when
Mm.
I was young, my dad would get mad. He would say he was a philosophy professor, very intelligent, but he had a temper. He used to always scream at us when we did something he didn't like and say, "You're such an individualist." And I'd be like, "I'm 3 years old. I don't even know what that means. I just want ice cream." But he'd be saying that, my whole life. And only as I get older and, you study, Orientalism, what was formerly known as that, but like Confucianism and, kind of the understanding of collectivism and just, the underpinnings of other cultures, like my ancestral culture, for example. And I was like, oh, I get what he was saying now. When he would gets mad, and quite frankly, I'm so American in that way. When I travel, I realize I'm so American. I just do what I want, and there's so much privilege in that, but there's also a
Yeah.
loneliness to that, and there's also like
Mm.
a pretty good chance you're going to have your dreams crushed, like, and and so, I mean, I realize now that that was being explored, but a lot of writing, and a lot of writers say this, I'm not the first. Writing is somewhere of a subconscious endeavor
Sure.
as
Yeah.
you develop the story, etc. So I think that's something that conflict of individualism versus collectivism, it was there with me as I was grew up on Long Island of all places. So
Yeah, and of course the word that you entered in the book that's sort of the embodiment of some of this tension is capitalism, which of course exists, it is a word outside of the book, but it becomes sort of the word in the book that sort of signifies sort of this tension between how people live, sort of how they exist, how they find joy. And it was funny because as I read different parts of the book and different stories between Win and Jared, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this sounds like a Vassar graduate right in this book. You could hear sort of like the wielding of capitalism as sort of this negative, this unilaterally negative term. I was like, oh my gosh, this person went to Vassar. But it was funny to feel that and to see it and to get that perspective from reading it.
it's so funny you say that because there's I could hear some of my sociology professors' voices in my ear when I was writing certain lines. I mean, of
Sure.
course, like kind of glib distillations of what they were saying, but I could hear like Bill Hoynes talking about media,
Mm,
or Diane Hereford talking about like gender and Pinar, like, and a lot of them are so, and Eileen Leonard, and some of these people are
mm,
retired, but they were, you know, pretty fantastic professors. I mean, really, and do I remember every book I read as a sociology major? No, but I remember a lot of these lectures, and I remember a lot of what we discussed because they
yeah,
they really influenced me, and it just because the book does censor on aspects of race, gender, class, but not in a textbook theoretical way, but in
right.
living your life kind of way. And so they're what I learned in those classes, or how I interpreted my learnings in those classes, did come out. So I guess it is a very Vassar book, but the characters didn't go to Vassar. I did
Well, of
change
course,
them.
I had to ask, obviously, because I knew you went to Vassar, having reached out about
Yeah,
the book, and I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this person had went to Swarthmore, and this one and that one, and all these things. And only at the end of the book, obviously, did a character who
yeah,
was new to us end up going to Vassar. But I
yeah.
was curious about that. I figured you're trying to distance it from your life in some way, at least titularly, try to make it not map onto your life as much as it otherwise could have. And I have to say, I can't wait when we finish to text Bill. I was just at Bill's house just last week. And so I can't wait to tell Bill that I spoke to you and that you shouted him out in the podcast today.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things, of course, that I'm curious about is the book took many years to write, and you started writing it at a very different time in our society. At the time in which you started writing it, I don't believe there was as much conversation about book bans or other kinds of sort of muzzles on certain kinds of language and
Yeah.
speech and things like that. And so I'm curious how you think about your book today, having been released in an environment that's much different than the one it existed in when you wrote it, and what either concerns or excitement do you have about that reality?
That's the challenge of writing a novel, because most novels take first novels can take 10 years, 5 years,
Mhm.
I hear 10 years. Um, and the world is changing very rapidly, and I'd say just about every other day I was writing it. I guess like in the more recent years, I was like, no one's gonna care about this. Like, why do I care about this anymore? Is this even relevant? Like, does the world really need this? And I mean, I'm stubborn, and I think I'm kind of grateful that I'm stubborn, right? And so it's like it doesn't matter. I just have to do it. And
Mm,
and in terms of muzzling, I mean, I have to say what I have to say, and especially around issues that are now being kind of put under an umbrella of DEI, or around race, class, gender, sexuality, um, I have to do it. I remember, like, and not to be dramatic, but like, I'll just die. I mean, I won't die physically, but die on the inside. I think that's
Yeah,
how a lot of
emotionally and
writers feel if they
spiritually.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't. I mean, part of me also wishes like, oh, what if I just, people always tell me, but when we tell people you're a writer, there's people who don't read that much. They're like, oh, you should write something like Jodi Picoult, or like, have you ever read The Notebook? It's a great book. And I'm like, yeah, I like that movie, but I can't really write that. That's just not really me. Have you thought
Right.
about romance? You know what I mean? And those are wonderful stories. Like, I'm not judging. I'm not saying, oh, I'm so above that. It's not that. It's just like I'm gonna write what I want to write, and I want to write what I feel I need to write. And
Mm,
that's unfortunately a little darker. Like I want to, I'm writing another book right now, and it's really dark. And I'm just
yeah.
realizing, oh, I'm sort of a darker person, and my soul has a lot of shadows in it or whatnot. And just accepting that, and I have to accept that in order to make the work I want to make.
Yeah.
And it is super unfortunate that this sentiment is growing, and but it's hard for me to believe. I mean, it's so interesting because I'm in the last year I got invited I applied for this program called Tulsa Remote. I lived in New York, San Francisco, LA, and I've lived in Dar es Salaam for this
Mm,
working for the CDC. So I lived around the world a little bit. I did junior abroad in London or outside of London and Brighton. Um, and I got this and I realized I wanted to pay less rent and write more. And so I got into this program called Tulsa Remote, and they pay you to move there to try Tulsa for a year and hope that you'll stay and buy a house. And it's a really cool program, supported by a philanthropist. And but I also realized I've been living in a bubble like my entire life.
mm,
And even Tulsa within itself, they call it a blueberry and a cherry pie, or I don't want to get too
mm.
political here, but um, and so all this rhetoric, I mean, it's horrifying and terrifying, but it also just feels very distant from me because my world is
Yeah.
insulated and everyone I know, that's like the farthest thing on their radar, or the farthest thing from their thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and I know maybe I should be more concerned. I should be, advocating. Of course, like I'm an advocate, but it also feels very far from my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So, and it
Yeah.
is scary. And also we can't control, and I can't control what I want to write, and just got to keep doing what I think I need to do.
Yeah.
But it's also good. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, no apologies needed. I'm just curious because as a writer and as a storyteller, I'm curious if your experience or your recognition that you've been in a bubble of sorts has motivated you to actively try to put yourself in a different bubble, right? One can imagine the thoughts or stories that you produce or think about could be different and could be exciting, could be new if you have a different reference point, i.e., existing in a place that's less familiar to you in your experience. How have you thought about that as you think about future writing projects or future creative processes?
Yeah, I am definitely, I just as a person, I'm trying to get out of bubbles. So living in Tulsa has been one. Bali is a definite bubble. So yeah, like the bubble of bubbles actually. But it's the interesting thing about these bubbles is that even if they're insular, they make them even more interesting. There's so many
Mm,
stories within that. And I mean, there's so many very, very good novels about like the plight of a writer because
mm,
writers live these like very isolated lives.
right.
And there's so many other professions. Like whenever like a book comes out or a memoir comes out about a banker, you're like, wow. Like I think that's why Michael Lewis is so compelling. He's a very good writer, but he's
Yeah.
also like had other careers. And so
Mm,
and I think that's interesting. And
yeah.
like I don't know if I want to read another book about a writer, to be honest. And
Yeah.
so I mean, yeah, I mean also I do want different experiences. I'm not living in California or New York right now.
Right.
Um and so I mean I love them, but it
Yeah, of
just
course.
life is taking me to other places. But
Yeah. And your book's been out since November of 24, so it's been several months. And I'm just curious, what the reaction has been, and what has surprised you. What have you learned about your work that you wrote, ironically enough, or about yourself based on the reaction of those who've read your work?
I made the mistake of just telling people right off the bat that I was writing a book years ago. So people were like just shocked that I wrote it. And I published it. And I've been talking like there were like 3, 4 years, the first three. People just don't know if you're not a writer or you don't write novels, you don't know that it just takes a long time. So the first year is
Sure.
like, oh, finish your book yet? You finish your book? Do you get it published yet? Do you get an agent? And like it just takes a long time. And so there comes a point like after 5 years where people are just like, don't, in their head, they're probably like, don't ask him about his book, you know? So I think there's just a lot of like genuine surprise and also like um encouragement that and
Mm,
people are like, I'm so impressed you did this. And I know it took a long time. So people in my who are close to me were really supportive and
great.
also acknowledges like how long and how much work it was and how much
Yeah.
sacrifice
Yeah.
it took. In terms of like other readers, I think people love it or hate it. And that's like part of being an artist. People love or hate your work. And it's good that people have a reaction. They're not just like meh.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for everyone, I don't think. There's a certain humor and a bite to it that is you either love it and you think it's funny or you think it's off-putting and these people are selfish and mean, which they are, and they're supposed to be selfish and mean sometimes.
Yeah.
So, and they're just like people, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, Tom, it was fun for me to read the book. I'm resisting being explicit about some of the parts that I like the most, only because I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't read it yet. But it was a very
you tell me
fun,
after.
yeah, I'll tell you after. It was very fun to read. It was very the cadence was very quick and it kept me engaged, which I really enjoyed. And like you said earlier, I think it was a fun piece of work that told stories that sometimes are not told. And so I'm grateful for you for being the person who was willing to bring those to the forefront and put yourself into those stories as well. So thank you for that. I just want to finish with three hot seat questions, some from our students, some from others on campus. And the first one actually, you sort of preempted it a little bit, but the first question was, what is your next book about? That's before I even knew you were writing another book. So what is maybe the elevator pitch, the sort of sizzle reel of the book you're working on right now?
It's all I will say is it's near future. So it's a near future, sort of dystopian, but not completely dystopian. Don't want to depress people. But it's about a young woman and her two sisters. One sister is a child psychiatrist and is sort of very burned out from her job. And the other sister works in philanthropy for a billionaire, seemingly benevolent billionaire. And just about their conflict and their kind of codependence, their conflict, their love for each other. So after my last book, I decided I wanted to try to write from the perspective of women, and it's hard,
Mm,
and I don't know if I can pull it off, to be honest, but I'm going to try. And I have a lot of women readers, so
cool. Thank you
cross
for that.
fingers.
The next question is, what was the hardest part of writing your first book?
To keep going when like you're
Yeah.
on draft like 8 and, and stuff isn't working and there's a lot of rejection, a lot of positive encouragement but a lot of rejection and just like maybe I should just put this in a drawer and let it go. And so just having the wherewithal and the resilience to keep going.
hmm Yeah. And the third and final question is, what character have you not yet written into any of your books or stories or novels that you're excited to write into a future work?
Ooh, but one, I'm interested in reincarnation, so and like Buddhism, like,
Mm.
and I'm not a Buddhist scholar, so I'm not gonna say. No, I'm like what I've been telling friends. I'm Buddhist curious. So, I was raised in a pretty fundamentalist Christian home, and now then I was agnostic, and now I'm interested in Buddhism. And one of the reasons why I'm in Bali is I had a friend who's a Buddhist teacher here, and
Mm.
so something maybe something about reincarnation. I don't know, maybe someone who's been reincarnated, or the voice of an animal that's someone who's been reincarnated into an animal, or yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
interested in that
that's so cool.
aspect.
Well, thank you for that, Tom. And like I said earlier, I think your story of your life, and in part with the book as a proxy, I think is an incredible testament to both you, but also to your ability to integrate, synthesize, create from this sort of mosaic of life experiences, sort of like a liberal arts education. And so it's been so cool to sort of hear you talk about your book, to have read your book, and to sort of see now the way in which different parts of your life have taken shape in this story that I think has the ears and eyes of an audience much broader than those who are immediately around you. So thank you for putting all of that together in a way that people could learn from, laugh from, cry from, and benefit from generally. So thank you for all of that, Tom.
Thank you, Wesley. Great interviewer.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. And thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great one. Bye bye now.